What's one of the funniest things that you see on America's Funniest Videos? It's usually someone falling down, isn't it? It seems like they always feature people falling. Have you ever seen the YouTube videos of a compilation of people who are texting while walking? Have you ever seen those? Here they are texting along, and they're in the mall, and pow, they fall down and they fall right into a mall fountain. Or they run into a pole because they're so concerned with looking at what's on that smartphone. Smartphones are for dummies, I'm afraid. We tend to put other things in front of what is important instead of putting one foot in front of the other and being careful where we walk. We oftentimes are going to stub our toes. Now, no one genuinely likes to stub their toe, do they? Do you remember the last time you stubbed your toe? Raise your hand if you remember the last time you stubbed your toe. Is there anyone here who has never stubbed their toe? Raise your hand. We've all done it, haven't we? The last time I stubbed my toe was about 2 weeks ago. I had left the bathroom, the lights were off, it was bedtime, and I walked down our upstairs hall, and I turned the corner to go into our bedroom, and I kicked Kalita's little metal toolbox. And it did not feel right. Now, was it her fault that I kicked her little metal toolbox, or was it my fault that I kicked her little metal toolbox? That's still up for debate. But you know, it's one of those things, we have a problem when we do things like that because we tend to want to blame someone else or something else. We tend to say, it's really not my fault. Why, if that toolbox weren't there, then I wouldn't have stubbed my toe. Or, if it weren't your toolbox, I wouldn't have stubbed my toe. We tend to have this half-hearted attitude with taking responsibility for some of the mistakes that we make ourselves. I want us to turn to Luke chapter 14. We were there last week. We are going to be there next week. There are 3 times in Luke chapter 14 where Jesus says something that's rather difficult and rather hard, and he says it all in the same passage. He talks about the cost of being a disciple, a follower of Jesus. And 3 different times Jesus says, you cannot be my disciple. That is so contrary to what we're accustomed to hearing in this plea to become a Christian. Oh, come to Christ. Find His forgiveness. Find His grace. Find His love. Find His mercy. You will be so satisfied. And Jesus is saying, are you really counting the cost? Are you really wanting to be my disciple? Last week we talked about how we cannot put anything above Him. And Jesus said in Luke chapter 14, in verses 25 through and 26, He said, if you put your parents above me, if you put your children above me, if you put your spouses above me, if you put your work above me, if you put yourself above me, you cannot be my disciple. And He was very emphatic about it. But he didn't stop there. He went on in Luke chapter 14, verses 27 through 30. He said this, and anyone who does not carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Now, besides being comedians, what do Jerry Lewis and Red Skelton and Dick Van Dyke and Chevy Chase and Jim Carrey all have in common? They're all popular comedians. Some are gone and some are at their prime right now. What else do they have in common besides being comedians? They're all known for their pratfalls. They're all known for falling down flat on their face. Chevy Chase, during the time of Gerald Ford's presidency, Chevy Chase started his national career on Saturday Night Live, and he played an incredible President Ford. The one thing he did over and over again in his skits was what? Fall, because it seemed like Jerry Ford just had a problem and was always noticed for his stumbling. And so Chevy Chase played him well. There are some older comedians, some from the black and white and even the silent movie days, that also were known for their stumbles and their falls. 2 that come to mind right away are Harold Lloyd and Charlie Chaplin. And these people were impeccable in their falls. You wanted to believe that they were actually dropping and falling and hurting so badly. No one enjoys genuinely stubbing their toes. We just don't enjoy that. Could you put that picture up again? We don't enjoy that. You know, when I was looking through Google Pictures for an appropriate picture for that slide, I came across some pretty nasty shots of what stubbed toes looked like. Open wounds. Toes that were swollen twice the size they should have. Medical photos. And I thought, no, that's not the kind of thing I wanted to put up here. So I put up something that's rather pleasant to look at. But we get the picture. We don't like to stub our toes. And when it happens, we want to blame someone else. And some would even say that Satan had a hand in this. Satan's the one that caused me to stub my toe. He put the obstacle in the way, and I ran into it, and it's not my fault. Well, it is. While the devil has little or nothing to do sometimes with stubbing our toes, half-heartedness plays a really big role in how we stub ourselves spiritually, how we hurt ourselves spiritually. We need to respond to the dangers of a half-hearted faith. Half-hearted faith means we're not paying attention. Half-hearted faith means we are walking through the areas of our life and not really noticing what's ahead of us. We're not watching for those things that could cause us to stumble and fall. What causes us as Christians to stub our toes? Well, Jesus gives some answers in Luke 14. First of all, the verse that I read, Luke 14:27, he says that laziness can cause us to stub our toes. Again, Luke 14:27, anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. When we do not do what we are commissioned to do as Christians, when we set it aside and we say that's not important enough for me to do, we're going to stub our toes, and we are going to get hurt, and we are going to fall. We live in a day of instant gratification. Used to be that when you fixed a pot of coffee, you did it the old-fashioned way, the way we do it on Sunday mornings in that big old percolator. You had to put the grounds in the basket, you had to put the water in the base, and you had to wait and wait and wait until the light came on or until it stopped perking. And then we moved on to things like Bunn coffee makers, which can make a whole pot of coffee in 3 minutes flat. But that wasn't fast enough. We go on to Keurig machines, where you can stick that little plastic cup in and close that lid and have 1 cup of perfect coffee in just a minute. Well, we also have instant coffee. But we have all these things where we want coffee with no waiting. We want mashed potatoes with no peelings. We want iced tea without any boiling water. And we want 200 or more channels on our TV with nothing worthwhile to watch. We want instant gratification. And simply feeling good can become one of life's goals. Simply feeling good, getting enough rest, relaxing, that's a goal. In fact, laziness has almost become a virtue in these United States. But if we would pick up our feet a little more, if we would walk with a little more energy and enthusiasm, if we would watch where we're going, we could clear more obstacles in our lives. Now, what's that got to do with Jesus, and what's that got to do with this cross-bearing situation? The cross was a real obstacle for Jesus. The cross was something he had to endure. The cross was something he had to carry through the city streets of Jerusalem. He did not want to do it. He did not deserve to do it. But he had to, because his whole mission, his whole purpose was to come and save us from our sins. And the cross was the only means possible of doing that. And so Jesus was arrested, and Jesus was beaten, and Jesus was mocked. Jesus had a crown of thorns placed on his head, and then with a stick or a rod, the crown of thorns was beaten into his skull. Jesus was whipped until the flesh tore off his back, and then Jesus was forced to carry a cross to the hill of Golgotha. Guess what? He dropped a couple times. We have at least one recording of him falling to the ground under the burden and under the weight as he carried that cross. It was Jesus who was laid on that cross on the hill of Calvary at Golgotha. And it was Jesus who stretched out his hands and allowed the soldiers to nail spikes into his hands and spikes into his feet. The cross was an obstacle. It was a real problem for Jesus. But when he bore his cross, he was headed out to die. And ever since, the cross has been symbolic with death. Now, if I really love the Lord Jesus Christ, I need to die to some things. I need to get rid of the laziness in my life. And I need to die to my selfish ambitions. I need to die to my selfish desires. I need to die to my own selfish plans. And I need to follow him. When Jesus said, unless you carry your cross, you cannot follow me, he said in another passage, unless you bear your cross daily, you cannot follow me. You cannot be my disciple. We've always said in this church, and especially in some of the sermons we've been looking at recently, we have said the aim of being a disciple is to simply be like the master. That's our goal. A disciple is going to be like the master. And that's what Jesus said in Luke chapter 6 in verse 40. He said, the student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. One of the best compliments a teacher could ever have would be to see a student who had achieved everything the teacher had achieved. The teacher could take them no further. The teacher had accomplished the work of passing on the knowledge and the skill and the fervency and the desire to the student. That's a successful teacher. And Jesus is saying we need to be like him. So if I'm going to be like Jesus, I need to be dead to myself. I cannot be lazy. I cannot be selfish. If I am to pick up my cross, I must follow Jesus. I hope that we consult with the Lord every day, about what we're going to do and how we're going to live. I hope it's not something of convenience where we wait until Sunday to even think about consulting with Jesus and talking to him and saying, Lord, I want to follow you. I hope we don't box him in. He expects us to see with open eyes the obstacles that are around us. And he expects for us to understand that he is leading us around those obstacles. Do you remember in the 23rd Psalm, David said, he leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. He leads me. I can't go through the valley of the shadow of death by myself. I need God to lead me. And there he is, guiding me through. Why does he do this? He does this because he knows the obstacles that are there. He knows what's in the way. Khalid and I have 2 dogs. And they're cute. And sometimes they're disgustingly cute. Sometimes we wish they weren't so cute that we could get mad at them once in a while. But we have 2 dogs, and we take care of these 2 dogs. When I walk those dogs, I have to be their eyes. They're more interested as we're walking along to see what other dogs have been in the neighborhood. They're more interested discovering what else is around them down at their level. They can't see the obstacles that are ahead of them that I can see. They can't see the big Rottweiler that's down on the next block that I could see.